Well, a WIS investigation finds that a $500,000 plan to demolish blight in Columbia is months behind schedule.
The city has not demolished any buildings with that money, and even the bidding to get that work done is still open.
WIS first investigated blight in Columbia last November, and we found the city has identified hundreds of abandoned buildings, many of which are safety hazards or simply eyesores in your community. In April, Columbia City Council approved more than $500,000 in American Rescue Plan funds to help expedite tearing down some of those buildings. WIS Chief Investigative Reporter Chris Joseph investigated last November and is following up a year later. So Chris joins us now with details on how quickly those homes were supposed to be taken down. Chris?
Dondi, the city's press release created a timeline where the first round of buildings was scheduled to come down around late July. Obviously, that didn't happen. The city's top code enforcer says unforeseen state-mandated asbestos surveys got in the way. But South Carolina's Department of Health and Environmental Control tells me asbestos surveys are common practice for demolition projects like this. I traveled across Columbia this fall to document the city's blight. I found boarded windows, caved-in roofs, and unhappy neighbors.
But it's time to ride down North Main Street and see something better, you know, see a beautiful community and not just some ran down homes and things that need a lot of fixing.
We try to keep our yards and stuff looking good and everything, and then to look across the street and see that, you know, it just give you the feeling that stuff is just going down here.
Our family home is up there too.
I also spoke with District 1 City Councilwoman Tina Herbert, who formerly worked as the Deputy Director of Columbia's Community Development.
I really do believe that we're moving to a point where the next generation doesn't really care for older homes and older stock. And so as people are passing, a lot of the situations with a lot of the properties are situations where, because we don't own these houses, a lot of times they're held up in estates. Sometimes folks just never figured out what they wanted to do with them. But in all of the cases, they never had the money to do anything with it. Because if you think about it, if they had the money to fix it up and earn some money off of it, they would have.
Madam Clerk, do you mind reading the roll, please?
Columbia is working on a solution. In April, the City Council approved $571,000 of ARPA funds to tear down blight.
We're trying to move this forward pretty quickly.
The city announced it had identified 77 properties to be demolished. 52 would come down in the first round, approximately 90 days from solicitation. Columbia was aiming for solicitations to open up on May 1st, with council approval in June. The other 25 were targeted to begin solicitation by September 2022. So if the original timeline had held, the first 52 properties would be demolished approximately 90 days from May 1st. 90 days from May 1st is July 30th. The ARPA fund money that has been given, no homes have been demolished by the city with those funds as of yet.
Correct.
David Hatcher is Columbia's housing official and leads the city's code enforcement. His team is responsible for keeping tabs on what he estimates to be 900 vacant buildings in the city.
These abandoned houses and code violations in general affect people's quality of life, so we take it personally.
Code enforcement curated the original list of 77 properties to be demolished.
The properties, those are the ones that were most likely to go forward. We were ready. I didn't see any obstacles at the time. You know, the title searches are clear. We're clear. We've done all the proper notification, and they were ready to go forward. So those are the ones that were picked.
Time and a complicated abatement system whittled those 77 properties into 54 by December 1st. What was a 2-round demolition plan turned into 4 rounds, due in part to DHEC-mandated asbestos surveys. Asbestos surveys and removal need to be done before the buildings can be demolished. Hatcher says the asbestos surveys were an unforeseen hurdle.
We didn't know early on that we were going to have to do asbestos surveys on all of them. We reached out to DHEC to find out what requirements would be required, and so we did find out we'd had to do asbestos surveys on each of the properties. I think it added about 90 days. I mean, the asbestos surveys were done in August, so we're just now getting them back.
I reached out to DHEC about the surveys, and a spokesperson sent a statement reading in part, "These asbestos surveys are a routine/required part of the demolition process, and that we've worked with the City of Columbia on demolition projects many, many times." DHEC pointed to EPA rules that have been in place since the 1990s, requiring asbestos surveys for large-scale public demolition projects. After I talked to DHEC, I reached back out to the city about why the asbestos surveys would be unforeseen and who signed off on the April timeline. Hatcher sent me a statement reading, "They weren't necessarily unforeseen. SCDHEC exempts single-family residences from the requirement of asbestos surveys. At the beginning of the project, I was under the impression that these demolitions would also be exempted, considering they are single-family residences." Hatcher says he provided the April timeline to the city manager. In our interview this month, Hatcher gave this update on the demolition properties.
Ideally, I would like to have them all done in 6 months to a year, but again, that's, I can't control all those obstacles we'll run into.
Back on North Main, Herbert preached patience.
I've told my residents and my constituents that it would take, I was hoping to start seeing houses go down in December, January, towards the beginning of the year. Because I do understand how the process is, and especially if we're getting federal funds, there are extra boxes to check. And I guess from my purview, I also noted it took us years to get some of the properties on the list. So I never had a real expectation that it took us years to go through this process, and now it's gonna be a quick get them knocked down.
So right now there are 2 demolition bids that are open for the first 2 rounds. That's 33 buildings potentially going to be demolished here soon. They both close on December 20th, and there's a countdown clock for both of them. You can find that on WISTV.com. The bids require the work on those properties to be done in 2 to 3 months, depending on the bid.
So, Chris, there are hundreds of vacant buildings in the city. What will happen to them?
Well, Dondi, obviously the priority right now is to get those 54 properties demolished. Hatcher's team is working to register vacant buildings to get them into that system and potentially lead to demolition as well. Now, I've made an interactive map showing which properties are targeted for demolition as of December 1st.